Oliver Stone movie is what a lot of us really, we were refreshed when that came out, refreshed our memories.
That movie was a stew of all of the conspiracy theories. Remember that?
Kind of tossed it in. Well, we'll talk about that later. Hey, just in the last 15, 20 minutes, the Miss World pageant officials have decided to move out of Nigeria. I'm not sure why they decided to go there in the first place, but 100 dead in the streets.
How could you riot over good-looking women in skimpy outfits who are hot? I mean, what is their problem?
Well, a newspaper said that Muhammad would have been for the pageant.
The Prophet Muhammad might have liked it.
And this caused rioting between Christians and Muslims in Nigeria.
Maybe he would have been.
Maybe.
Wait, hold on.
What side were each on, right?
Well, I want to pursue this. Maybe he would have been, because after all, if Muhammad or God were ashamed of the human body, why would they have created it?
There you go.
And the other story we've got tonight, say it isn't so. Our parent company, Disney's cruise ship, has come down with that stomach virus.
Oh, no.
About 100 passengers on Disney's Magic got sick. Well, they're going to scrub it down. They'll take care of it. More than 500 or 600 got sick on that 4 Holland America cruises. They're still scrubbing that ship down. Israeli forces moved into Bethlehem today hunting for militants. Indonesia says the suspected mastermind of that huge nightclub bombing in Bali last month that killed mostly Australians, although they claim they were aiming for Americans. Well, anyway, they say the mastermind on that, the suspect has confessed to planning and carrying it out.
Yeah, did you hear what he said? He said when it exploded, he enjoyed it.
How many fingernails does he have left, do you think?
I'd like to take him and put him on the end of a rope and drag him around Lake Michigan for about 3 or 4 hours.
You know, you'd been a great rack master for Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, for a pacifist, you're very violent.
I never said I was a pacifist. Look, you know what? I could have stood right next to Che and operated the executions in the Moro Castle. When I don't like somebody, man, that's it. It's over.
He sounds proud of that.
39 years ago today, JFK was killed. And audio tapes from that day have been released today. Jim Wooten is on the story for ABC News.
For the country, for the world, a moment when time stopped.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route.
And for several members of Kennedy's cabinet en route to Japan, the word came from a teletype, a news ticker on the plane. It could be fatal, Secretary of State Dean Rusk told the others. The president's press secretary, Pierre Salinger, radioed the White House.
Give me all available information on President, over. We do not know how serious the situation is. We have no information.
The pilot was ordered to change directions.
This plane, on which Secretary of State, other cabinet ministers headed for Japan, turning around, returning to Honolulu, will arrive there approximately 2 hours, over.
But what then? Head for Texas or back to Washington?
We'll need accepted flights so can determine whether some members of this party should go directly to Dallas, over. All right, from the AP bulletin, Kennedy apparently shot in head. He fell face down in back seat of his car. Blood was on his head. Mrs. Kennedy cried, "Oh no," and tried to hold up his head.
On their plane, as all over America, an eternity of uncertain waiting. Until
the president is dead.
The White House radioed the plane.
We have reports that the president is dead, that he died about 35 minutes ago. Do you have that, over? The president is dead, is that correct? That is correct. That is correct.
While their plane neared Hawaii, another prepared to leave Dallas.
This is Andrews. That is a firm 260 is about getting ready to take off.
He was referring to Air Force One. President Kennedy's body was aboard, and his widow. President Lyndon Johnson was aboard as well, sworn into office in the cockpit.
Roger, Air Force One. Are you airborne at present? Affirmative. Airborne at 2047.
That flight, on that November 22nd, took them and took America into an evening and a season of grief.
Boy, hearing that again sends chills up your spine, doesn't it?
It's just so, you can't put your hands on it, man. It's just so...
You know, I agree with you, we think of the violence in foreign countries. You know how they have revolutions and we feel smug, and here we had one so relatively recently in our history that it's just shocking. And after that, for the days after that, people didn't know if there was some conspiracy to get other government officials, what went on. They've never really, to a lot of people's satisfaction, gotten to the bottom of the assassination. As I mentioned, the JFK movie by Oliver Stone seems to raise more questions than it answers in some people's minds. The commission...
You can't answer it because there is no answer, because the Warren Commission never got to the bottom of it.
Right.
And the tragedy of it is we don't, to this day, know who did it. We only have theories and conspiracies about it with shreds and little bits of information. I was telling Bill that when I was working on the radio in Tampa, I get a call from a guy one day who knows a tremendous amount about Cuba. So I say to him, you know, hang on a second. And when we go into the break, I start talking to him. It turns out that this particular guy, whose last name is Lee, he was the head of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee.
Which was
That was the pro-Cuban organization that in the United States that wanted this country to leave Castro alone and leave the Cuban Revolution alone. And he told me in many conversations that Oswald was a crook, that there was something wrong with him, that when Oswald was on the streets in New Orleans selling Fair Play for Cuba Committee memberships, he was keeping the money instead of turning it into the national office, and that shortly before the assassination, they were going to cut Oswald loose because they suspected that he was dealing in information. He also told me that anybody that was connected with the assassination, from him to anybody who was around at the time that it happened, that they had a lifelong FBI wiretap on their phone, and that they were constantly under suspicion, and that he was to that day.
Now, for people that are listening that are 40 years old, that were born at the time all this happened, fill in a couple of gaps. The guy accused of firing the rifle that killed Kennedy, Lee Harvey Oswald, was shot before he could go to trial.
He was shot by
Jack Ruby,
a
nightclub owner who was a cop wannabe who hung around police and managed to talk his way backstage.
He was a mobster is what he was.
But he knew some people there, and the security wasn't quite right. And in plain view of the public, caught on by a camera that was on the front page of the paper. This is before, you know, like now it'd all be live on CNN and Fox, but it was there was a snapshot of Ruby shooting this guy. Then Ruby died of cancer, right?
In jail.
In jail, so we never really had the trial. In case you wonder why authorities frequently want to make sure the trial take place, is because then you can round up suspects, put people under oath, and find out and get to the bottom of that. Instead, we never really did. We had to have the Warren Commission. Gerald Ford, the former president, was on that. Congressman Conyers was on that, right, from Michigan?
So was Arlen Specter.
Arlen Specter. They couldn't find the conspiracy theories beyond Lee Harvey Oswald. Some people thought Castro did it, and Kennedy's brother, apparently, who was later assassinated himself, Robert Kennedy, I guess, went to his grave fearing that some of his anti-Castro movements might have backfired on him, that people who liked Castro might have done this. It was a big mess, so we didn't really get enough answers.
And the JFK assassination, to me, is the seminal event of our generation, which explains everything bad that followed.
That's a start.
The assassination of Bobby Kennedy, of Martin Luther King Jr.,
Medgar Evers,
of Watergate. It also explains things like the foreign policy of the U.S., because the foreign policy set by men who worked in foreign policy for JFK set the tone for the foreign policy that all the events that really come up to the latest seminal event, which also disillusions us about so many things, and that, of course, is 9/11. But before we stop...
Well, wait a minute. I want to interject one thing and correct Jim.
Mm-hmm.
The theory is that because Kennedy pulled the planes and the air support for the Bay of Pigs, the theory that floats around is that the hardcore Cuban exile community and the mob did him in.
Right, that's another theory. Now, for again, people who don't know about that, Kennedy and his young administration authorized a takeover of Cuba. Cuban nationals in Miami were supported by the CIA briefly. went to Cuba to do a counter-revolution, get rid of Castro. They were more or less abandoned by our people, the president who didn't want to go down and
failed miserably.
Interestingly, Castro sent all those people back in a relatively short period of time, the ones that were captured, and I never quite understood what we had to give Castro to get them back.
Food and medicine.
And they came back, so there were all kinds of things that the Kennedys felt bad about, that maybe that bungled event, that later on there were word that we sent, exploding cigars to Castro.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, it was a big mess, so we don't know.
Would you like to hear some JFK before we quit?
Yes.
Here's JFK from the same year of his assassination. And tell me if you don't think it sounds like somebody from last year.
This nation needs a tax cut now that will benefit every family and every business. A tax cut means higher family income and a balanced federal budget. Every taxpayer and his family will have more money left over after taxes for a new car, a new home, new conveniences, education, and investment. Every businessman can keep a higher percentage of his profits, and as the national income grows, the federal government will ultimately end up with more revenues. Prosperity is the real way to balance our budget.
Sound like somebody you know?
Yeah.
George W. Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And now we find out that he was way sicker than we realized, the back injury that he had suffered in World War II, which was really, people didn't, they camouflaged it so well. He one time had to take literally a crane to lift him into Air Force One because he couldn't climb up the steps. But he didn't talk about that. We knew he played touch football. It turns out he did all of that in pain, and this bevy of medicines that they just put in the newspapers about that he was taking was to counter colitis, which he had constant diarrhea. He had no adrenaline system, so he's taking drugs for that. And what a mess. But he looked alert and youthful, and to our parents, not to us, but to our parents and grandparents, they thought he was the youthful Kennedy. To people that were just born in the 40s or 50s, of course, he's ancient history, but to people who were little then, he didn't seem that young. But when you look at pictures of him,
he was young.
He was in his 40s, right?
He was young.
He was young by today's standards.
And I'll tell you, I'm going to say it again. And I mean
the first Catholic president, incidentally, that was a big thing. We
Roman Catholic president.
That was a big thing because some people who were not Catholic thought the Pope would be running the White House. He assured them. It sounds ridiculous today, but there was that anti-Catholic feeling among some politicians.
And in this telegenic age of politics, so many Democrats since have tried to emulate his style on camera.
How come nobody tries to imitate Nixon's style on camera?
Doesn't work.
Well, Nixon was bitter because Kennedy's looks. Nixon
sweated on TV, and he looked like a criminal, even though at that time, plus he had been caught in some other things. But
I'm just saying that did come to play. The looks of Kennedy that Nixon felt were unfair. Kennedy was tan, youthful, had money.
Nixon won the debate on radio.
Yes, he did. Nixon was not a bad guy in some respects, but the one thing I don't want to say before we get off of this is it has become great sport now to make fun of Ted Kennedy, and it's been great sport to make fun of the Kennedys. But the fact is, and I said this the other day, I'll say it again, name me any family in this country that lost 3 of their sons in the service of their country. Can anybody name anybody?
No.
So when these people get on the radio, be it talk radio or TV, or make snide remarks, politicians, about the Kennedys, I would only ask them to examine their own situation and come forward and let us know fill us in about, have they made that kind of sacrifice? And I'll bet you the answer would be no.
I bet you lots of ordinary families, however, have lost boys in war, which is similar kind of service, although not celebrated like you're referring to.
Well, that's one of the reasons why when you get somebody who's lost a son in Vietnam or lost a brother in Vietnam or lost somebody in World War II or lost somebody in Korea, that's why you don't make jokes about it.
That's right.
Because, well, it's self-explanatory. 629 at WLS. WLS 3-day forecast. It's the weekend. Tonight, clearing this evening, a low in the mid-20s. And then tomorrow, partly cloudy, high in the mid-40s. Doesn't make a difference whether the wind's 25, 30, or 40 miles an hour. Jim will be out golfing anyway, even if the balls blow back. Saturday night, mostly clear and a low in the upper 20s. Sunday, partly cloudy, chance of snow showers, colder, and a high in the low 30s. Once again, tonight, clearing this evening, a low in the mid-20s. WLS Time Saver Traffic, Grant Park.
And northbound Route 53 is struggling now due to an accident at Algonquin Road, blocking the right lane. Outbound Eisenhower, delay past the Tri-State up to North Avenue is due to an accident there, also in the right lane. Also the exit ramp blocked. 27 out to Manheim, but 55 now out to Route 53. This report sponsored by Ford Quality Check Certified Pre-Owned Vehicles. Every Ford Quality Check Certified Pre-Owned vehicle goes through a rigorous 115-point inspection. To locate the Ford Quality Check Certified Pre-Owned dealer nearest you, visit FordCPO.com. I'm Grant Park with WLS Time Saver Traffic.
6:30 at Chicago's News Talk 890 WLS. Hey, how would you like to be your own boss? Well, you know what? All you got to do is open the restaurant, deli, or fast food establishment or pizzeria that you've always thought about. Hey, you sit back, you think about it. Time's running out, and there's nothing like doing it today. Pierce Chef Mart and Food Service Equipment Company is the one to talk to. 877-354-1265. Save 50% on excellent pre-owned equipment. Pierce Chef Mart and Food Service Equipment Company is the Midwest's largest dealer of food service equipment, new and pre-owned. From mixers to pizza ovens, dough rollers, ice cream parlor equipment, hot dogs, deli cases, steam tables. Man, I can taste that deli already at Deli Foods you're running. What you need to do to get your business started is talk to Pierce, and they ship anywhere. Within the sound of my voice. They've also got a 30,000 square foot showroom that'll just knock you out. 9685 West 55th Street, Countryside, LaGrange. But let me give you the number again. 877-354-1265, or visit their website, www.pierceequipmentcompany.com. Financing is available. Visa, MasterCard are accepted. You want to get a business up off the ground? You want that deli you've always thought about? That hot dog stand? Hey, man, Pierce are the folks to talk to.